Great. So we held our interviews in November, but we did not fill the position for the chamber. So we have an applicant for that position. Raymond Stobie is here, and you have in front of you his application that he submitted along with the interview questions, same ones that we used in November. The way this is going to work, just as a reminder, so Mr. Stobie has been nominated by the Chamber of Commerce. You'll interview him. I have kind of a little secret ballot. Each of you will check the box for recommend or not recommend. And then those will be collected and then given to the mayor, and the mayor will make the final decision on the appointment to the Historic Review Board. So it'll be a few days probably before we get word officially. And then at the next city commission meeting, the mayor would then officially appoint or formally appoint the candidate to the Historic Review Board. And terms are, I believe, 3 years now. I think that's what I told you. Yeah. 3 years. Yeah. So any questions about the process? And the board won't deliberate. So you'll just do the secret ballot and there'll be no discussion amongst the board after the interview. Does that work?
Sure.
Okay.
Works for me. Would you like to come forward, Mr. Stobie?
Why not?
I'll ask you to take the first question.
Alrighty. Why are you applying for a position on the Historic Review Board?
Well, I'm applying as nominated as from the Chamber of Commerce, and part of our mission statement with the Chamber is improving the quality of life in Oregon City, and I believe historic preservation is a great part, a huge part of the quality of life in Oregon City. I'm also highly interested in the position because I am a resident of Oregon City. I call it home now, and it's time to get back to the community. So I feel this is a great start to public service.
What is your background in historical preservation?
I've been a banker for about 17 years. Have very limited experience in historic preservation. Lending is hard to do when it comes to historic preservation, although I haven't done much lending. I have been a resource to individuals throughout Clackamas County and Multnomah County when it comes to historic preservation. Recently, a building down on Main Street, and then not so recently, another home in Oregon City as well.
Have you previously served on an appointed board?
I have. I've been on the Chamber of Commerce board. I'm past president. Also with Clackamas Repertory Theater, Clackamas Volunteers in Medicine. Yeah.
What was the most rewarding part of one of those positions?
I think I'll if I may, try to combine those answers, the frustrating part and the most rewarding.
Yeah.
Chamber of Commerce, when I first joined the board, it was a great group, but it wasn't a collaborative group. It was a lot of individuals who wouldn't ask questions. They weren't inquisitive. They were just more of a rubber stamp. And then to me, that was frustrating because they didn't understand what they were voting on. They didn't understand the issues that were being presented to them. And as we moved forward, I was on the board for about four years. And as we moved forward as a board, we challenged each other to ask questions, to understand what was going on and make better decisions for the chamber. And I think the frustrating part was that rubber stamp board, not asking questions, not being inquisitive. And then the rewarding part was to see the results of what came out of a couple of planning sessions and seeing us work more together as a team, as a full board should.
Is this on me now? My
Number
turn?
4.
It's on you. It's all,
All right.
all you, Grant.
How would you approach a potential contentious hearing knowing that there are passionate opinions on both sides of the issue?
Let them talk. Let them speak. I think the most, in my experience, one of the most frustrating items is that people aren't allowed or don't get the opportunity to speak and get heard and be heard. And I think a lot of times that's what they want. They want to be heard. They want their opinion, their voice to be heard. And by letting that happen, I think resolutions can happen easier.
Does it go back to me?
It is.
Sure.
Back to you, Claire.
I've got a follow up actually on that one. If I can go off script just for a moment, but
Yeah.
how would you say that you would balance that need to be heard with the process, the rules, the regulations that surround the hearings? This being a quasi judicial board.
I think if we let the parties speak their mind, we as a board will be able to make better recommendations and fully explain or better explain why those decisions were made. And I think the parties will have will receive those decisions better because they were heard.
Thank you.
All right.
And in reference, just going back on one of these others, you said you didn't have too much background in historic preservation, but you're willing to get
I'm willing to learn.
juiced up and
Oh yeah,
and ready for that.
absolutely.
What do you believe is the role between the HRB and the neighborhood associations?
The neighborhood associations, I believe, because they have an interest in a vested interest in their neighborhood and where they live, where they work, where they play. And I think that with the HRB, it is our duty to enforce the guidelines set forth so when a project does come forth, yeah, I'll end it there, actually. Lost my train of thought on that question.
That's all right.
So,
So you know it meets once a month. It could be anywhere from 6 o'clock till 9 o'clock, preferably
10.
as early as possible.
True.
But you really don't have any architectural background per se.
No.
Yeah. But you would have a desire to serve.
Desire to serve, absolutely.
Got it.
As you can see by the application and resume, I'm definitely willing and definitely want to serve. And there was one, I didn't fill it on the application. Thinking on the way here, I also serve as vice chair on the Hillendale Neighborhood Association and alternate on the CIC. Just started on that this year.
So with the things that you're involved in, you'd have time to do this. Gotcha.
Anything else you'd like to add?
I'm excited to serve, and I hope you'll have me on the board.
gonna
Thank
have
you
a
for
steep
coming.
learning curve.
Yeah, but I have a good mentor.
Okay. And now you will
Yeah.
pass out the secret.
Yes,
ballots
and
and,
before I do that, I want to just, I meant to say before we started that while some of the, positions on the board do require a lot of background knowledge and experience, the chamber position isn't meant to require a lot of experience in historic preservation. And so I just want to make sure that that's understood.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Sean.
with that, we will move forward to the next item on the agenda, item 3B, design advice for new construction on a residential site in Kenema. Here we have the staff report, commission report.
Yes, and I'm going to try and get our lighting system.
Oh, the mood lighting?
So we can see the.
Oh, at least there's not a whole lot.
There we go. Okay, so we've got a design advice item for a new single-family home in the Kenema National Register District. And so the owners or applicants are here, and I'll say a few things and then kind of let you guys speak. Maybe the best way to do this would be for me to just give you the facts.
Yes.
And then you all can come up, and then I've got a couple of staff comments that I'd like to share, just as some initial kind of items that I noted, and then the board can discuss. Does that work okay?
Very good.
All right, so our site is here on 4th Avenue at the corner of 4th and Hedges, which is that unimproved right-of-way right here. It's a 100 by 100 lot. And previously, this lot actually was part of an application in 2005. Thank you for pointing that out, Grant. And I have the plans from back then just to show you. The house was never built. I think probably just because the recession happened and then didn't work out. And then there are some neighboring, a couple of the neighboring properties that are designated structures. This is 408 4th, so that's right here, kind of on the other side of Hedges on 4th Avenue, little bungalow that's designated, and then on the other side of 4th Avenue, closer to Ganong, is another home. It's more of a vernacular style. So just to kind of give you a sense of the homes in the immediate surroundings. This was the 2005 plan. It actually included 5 homes. So you see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so I believe 3, 4, and 5 were built. 1 and 2 were not. This was the plan for that lot number 2, which is the lot we're looking at now. So it was a bungalow style back then. The design guidelines were a little bit different in 2005, so I just want to make sure that we're aware we're not working under the same exact design guidelines. But for this plan, the house was actually facing Hedges. So the front elevation that you're looking at actually faced Hedges, and then the left elevation was what you would have seen from 4th Avenue. And there was a detached garage in the plan as well. So I will...
Could you go back to the lot one, please? The site plan? I mean, with the different...
This one's
drawing?
Yeah.
And it's lot 2?
Lot 2.
Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Right here.
So I saw this 2, that wasn't right. Yeah, that's right.
And we did actually, the board last year approved a home on this lot. So that'll be under construction, probably coming up later this year. Okay, so I'll go back to this one and then invite the applicant to come up and maybe kind of make a quick little presentation if you'd like to. If not, I can totally show your plans myself.
you just want to show them, or have they seen the
Yeah.
plan? Okay.
Yes, everything that you submitted to me was included in their agenda packet.
Is it all right if there's three of us in here?
Yeah.
Sure.
For the benefit of history, if you would state your name and position, that would be
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you guys for spending your time here. My name is Igor. I am the owner. This is my wife. We bought that lot just earlier last year. And we have been residents of Oregon City for over a decade. We just live over by Holcomb. And we are looking to settle in the historic district just because of the location, the value, how it's being preserved, not being crowded with contemporary structures and buildings that I've seen around. And also, this is sort of the house that we want to build as a dream house. So.
I'm Bo Robinson with Design Providence LLC, and helping them create their home, and I've done a few other projects. Only one other in Kenema, and then a couple others in the McLaughlin district. So.
And I wanted to add that I've actually lived here for 20 years, and I really love Oregon City overall, and love Kenema, especially because it has that historic value. It has that historic special touch that, I don't know, makes me want to be part of. And as you will see later, the house that we want to build on this lot is fairly large. And the reason behind it is that because we have 3 girls that we're raising, and we also have 2 elderly mothers. And we want it to be a home long-term for all of us that would accommodate us, our parents, and potentially our children's families as well. Thank you.
Do you have a presentation? Do you want to step us through the design and what your intentions here are?
Can I kind of run through that?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Once we started brainstorming on the project, they had some pretty specific things they wanted to accomplish. So I think this is a start towards that. In keeping with some of the criteria, the idea was to basically have an attached garage, but have it not visible from either Hedges or Fourth, by having it back behind and having a driveway run up alongside the adjacent property's driveway, which I don't remember what lot number that is, but and leaving enough room to then be able to pull into the garage and turn around and drive back down to Hedges. Trying as much as possible to capitalize on some of the views that are there, and also, create a aesthetically pleasing facade on both Hedges and Fourth, especially, and try to, as much as possible, get that sort of square footprint that accommodates all their floor plan needs, for modern living. Beyond that, I think we're looking for some input, to help kind of massage it into in keeping with what's traditionally looked for there.
Do you know right off what the square footage approximately will be?
Right around 3,000 living space. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I was just going to ask.
What's the footprint, do you know?
Actually, that's a good question. I have that on there. It is to scale though, so let me grab
What's that?
About 2,200
Oh, the overall.
overall footprint.
Yeah. I'll just kind of rough it out. Yeah. I need to start bringing reading glasses. 48 by 50.
48 by 50, so it's a
2,400.
25.
Yeah, approximately. What's that?
That's after that.
Oh, yeah, right.
It's about 21% to this.
Sure. Yeah, this would be 24.
So we have some room dimensions, but
Would you like me to show the elevations
Oh, sure.
on the screen?
no.
So that would be off of 4th Street. And then off of Hedges. Yeah. That'd be kind of tucked back behind. On the same thing, that would be on kind of a, right now there's nothing adjacent to that.
Facing down an alley in between.
I'm happy to start off with staff comments unless you guys have more that you want to talk about. Okay.
That'd be great.
And I do want to mention too that this design advice is always non-binding, and it's just meant to help you guys, put together your application. And we talked about this before you scheduled it, but it's meant to kind of streamline the process so that when applications come in, you've already heard some good feedback on your plans. So I'll go back to the elevation here. So a couple of items that I just want to mention for the board. So this is a bungalow style, which in Kenema, bungalows and vernacular, design are both appropriate. And kind of of course, we see more vernacular, especially up in the hillside. But we do see bungalows. There's the one right across the way, across Hedges. And so the kind of placement of and percentage of each kind of different design is context-based. And so we'd want to make sure that, or the board would want to make a finding at some point that this design isn't, overpowering the street along 4th or, overwhelming the area with, too many bungalows, I guess, in one area. But I don't see an issue with that at all in this case. So the typically we don't see attached garages. I know there have been a couple that have been approved recently. Those were very specific circumstances when there was a natural resource overlay, a stream that actually ran through the property. Really unique case. And so I would just caution that, attached garages are rare and really don't fit with the guidelines. The massing of the front facade is a little bit big, just because of the hillside, and looking up from 4th, we typically want to see a 1.5 story massing, and this is really more of a 3-story. And so that bottom portion, to really reduce as much as possible would be best. The footprint is a little bit big for a bungalow as well. I think what we saw previously in the, like what was proposed in 2005, for example, was a little bit more appropriate as far as the footprint and the massing goes. One potential strategy for this lot could be to face the house towards Hedges. that would be appropriate, and I'll show you guys the 2 pages that I'm kind of referring to in the design guidelines document that kind of lay out some of these guidelines that I'm referring to. Let's see. So if the house faced hedges, then we would be looking at that from Fourth.
The other one, sorry, west.
The other one?
That one.
No, that's what's on his side. She's saying if we rotated it, but then
Yeah.
that it would complete the whole house would change if that were the case
Would it?
too. Yeah.
Okay.
So because we'd probably actually rotate the roof line
Yeah.
back the other way, because you could have theoretically you can have a bungalow with the roof either gabled towards the street or shedded towards the street, right? So it's going to be a matter of capitalizing on some windows on the upper level
Yeah.
for the views and whatnot.
Okay. So as far as the site goes, I circled the guideline up there that talks about houses may face the front or the side, depending on the topography. And I think if the massing can be reduced by facing the house towards hedges, then that might be a good strategy. And then down at the bottom, I just note that accessory buildings are typically detached. As far as a building form, there are some kind of proportions that we would want to try and meet. I don't know that the current house is, I think it's a little bit, the ratio is not going to be quite there with the existing design. So that's height to width ratio and then height to depth. And for the porch, I think you have a prominent front porch with simple posts, and so the kind of bulky posts at the bottom might want to modify that design a little bit. And then the dormers on the front, usually there's a single dormer, so maybe just the shed dormer, maybe not all 3. That shed dormer in the middle would be absolutely appropriate,
That's
but
easy.
maybe not all 3. And then this open gable here, the open gable is probably not typical. Maybe a closed or no gable. But from there, I will go ahead and let the board add to and disagree with me or agree with me on those.
The first thing that strikes me is the size of the structure. And that's not that there isn't some precedent.
Yeah.
The Fellows House is 4,200 square feet. The Cochran House is, I don't know how many. It's way over 3,000. I know those 2 are. I believe the house where Fox Engineering exceeds 3,000. Wouldn't guarantee that. All 3 of those are down in the commercial district on McLaughlin. But I don't think that there's a residential structure up on the hill that is close to that.
So is it okay if I talk?
Sure,
I'm
absolutely.
sorry, I don't
That's
wanna-
what this is. Yeah.
Okay. This house that was just recently completed, it's at the corner of 4th and
Yeah.
712 4th is the address.
it's a pretty big footprint.
It
And
is.
it has a garage facing 4th.
I believe its square footage is 2,600.
And that went through a lot of iterations before it was arrived at that particular house.
And that one especially, that was actually the one I was mentioning that
With the
was
garages.
recently approved with the garage. There's a stream on that property, and so where they could place the house was very, very limited, and there wasn't anywhere to put a second detached garage. And then the only access that was possible was actually through the property in front of them, which I think lucky for in this situation, it was owned by a family member, and so they were able to get an easement for the driveway up the hill to that garage. So there's a really unique situation with the stream on that property and kind of the constraints around that and getting access for a driveway. And so I wouldn't necessarily use that as a precedent for anything else in Kenema.
Nevertheless, it's a two-car garage visible from 4th Street.
Yeah, it's,
Whereas what we're trying to do is completely conceal a garage so you can't really even see it unless you hike up a 50-foot driveway.
right.
So, and if you're comparing the two, I would say that what we're after here is actually, you know, exceedingly more beneficial than what's going on that one, potentially. As far as it being attached. I think the goal would be to not see a garage or a modern type garage, right? So I think we're sort of accomplishing that. And if we detach it, we might actually be exposing the garage more to being visible from the street. So I think we could get the look of basically a bungalow with no garage, theoretically, for all intents and purposes, with what we're trying to do right now.
So given the design guidelines for Kenema, I would highly suggest that unless there were extenuating circumstances that justified adding an attached garage, that you submit as a detached garage. That gives you the highest likelihood of getting approval.
But shouldn't the goals be the important thing as opposed to a set guideline? I mean, the intent should be the most important thing of it, theoretically, right?
So one thing to understand about the process is that the design guidelines basically give you a de facto approval. So if you follow them exactly, then that's pretty much a cookie cutter. You can move through the process without any burden. If you divert from the design guidelines, the burden shifts to you to give us evidence why that should be acceptable or why that deviation should be allowed.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I see what you're trying to do. It's a large house. You're trying to accomplish a lot of things in a box. It's basically a very large tract home with bungalow elements that are applied to it. It's not really a historic looking house.
Right.
It doesn't have the integrity of what could be a craftsman or a bungalow. It is very large in massing. I totally get what you want to do. However, by the size and the scale of it and the elements that you have here, they're not hitting the point. I think you're there, but it's not going to be something that you can probably make fly. There's a lot of elements here that are somewhat bungalow-esque, but there's some things that aren't. It's a large house with a two-car garage, and I get it. I totally get what you're trying to do. But if you look in that neighborhood, and don't get me wrong, Kenema's full of you name it, and I get that. But the vast majority of the homes in that area have detached garages. And that's pretty much, if you look at anywhere in the McLaughlin neighborhood in Kenema, the majority of the homes, yes, they're very old, but they all have detached garages. That was kind of the gig.
So would the preference be to actually have a front and center detached garage as opposed to not seeing a garage?
Well, the plan that was brought up earlier, that was approved 10 years.
Yeah.
A while ago.
10 years ago.
More than that. It was a craftsman house. It was a story and a half. You've got an element of a story and a half when you look at the other elevation.
Slope. That showed zero slope, which I don't know if that was just, here's a plan. That's a plan called the Deschutes, and I believe that's from a company.
It's from the bungalow company.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So, I mean, that was just a stock can plan that.
Right, but it had the necessary elements of what a bungalow was, and it was in scale.
Absolutely.
This is completely out of proportion for the size.
Right. And we're dealing with some slope.
Sure.
That's where it gets challenging because
Right, but then
we can't reconcile, we can't have the main floor halfway down on the property below the high point, 12 or 13 feet below the high point of the property.
But you can reduce the massing of this.
Absolutely.
You have a massive amount of roof.
Yeah.
And that when you go to the other elevation that is on hedges, you've got all the workings of what a story and a half
Right.
Craftsman is. And then you've got the daylight, but when you've got the massing of these columns, which can be changed, but that,
Yeah, the style things I'm not, we can fine tune.
sure,
all that,
and that's great.
It's the big
But-
picture part.
But what you've got on this side is elements of a Craftsman. When you look
Right.
on the other elevation, you've got tall windows for the view, but they don't fly.
On the north or,
On
main-
that one
Okay.
there.
Would be the
Right.
north.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of window, which I get it. You want a view, but at the same time, it's the window massing is in and of itself quite a bit.
sure.
So there's elements you can do, but the size of it, anywhere else, you could put this thing and you would get a lot of space and you can make that work. But here, I think you're there, but you're there in a big way, you know. And I think you might get some backlash on
Sure.
this from the neighborhood. Well, I know you will.
The massing,
Yeah.
yeah.
The massing, you've got good elements here, but they're not quite nailed. Whether it's, you know, the shed with the two gables on that third floor, they could be integrated in a much different way to still have a cool look to it.
Oh,
Yeah.
still doing gables with the shed?
You
mean?
could, but you could bring that shed down a little bit so it's
Right.
integrated, or you get rid of it and make it all shed. That would reduce massing. But one of those,
There's still a lot of
There's a lot of roof.
aesthetic massaging to do. I'm
Yeah.
not as concerned about that at this point as the big picture. you
Yeah.
know, and
some of the guidelines, I think what could be an error, and I think I might be wrong, but one of the guidelines is low pitched roofs. And it will say on there 612,
Right.
Yep.
but it says 612 minimum. It really should say 612 maximum. Because typically a bungalow would be in the 4 to 5 range for a pitch.
but would that be more? Those would be more on the gables that are exposed to the street, as opposed to the story and a half portion would be normally up at
Sometimes,
8 or
yeah.
9.
Like your
because-
side, it could be higher than that, but I sometimes wonder on that guideline if it's supposed to be minimum. Because low
Supposed to be
pitch roof
maximum.
means
Yeah.
3 to 4 to 5 to 6. You get beyond that, you're starting to get into a different style.
Right, right.
But you're right, on a story and a half, typically that bigger gable.
Needs some space up there to.
But
yeah.
sometimes it's usually about a 6 to around there, because a 6 is still a little steep, and then your sheds are much lower. But I think there's elements, but it's big, and
Right.
I think you might get pushback because the garage is part of the house. Because basically, like I said, it's a big tract home with bungalow elements that are just kind of applied but not really authentic.
Okay.
But I'm only saying that because I know the neighborhood really well as
Right,
far as
right.
what you're up against and what you're gonna have to come back and back and back for.
When context is taken into account, is the context of the adjacent newer homes also taken into account? The massing of the two newer
Well,
bungalows?
you could say that, but you could also say, what about that really good-looking fourplex from the 70s? Does that come into context? Is that any different than what was just built a year ago? I don't think so, because everything has to be taken in and of itself for what it is.
Right, but I'm talking specifically about bungalow plans that were built after this 2005 approval, or maybe previous to that are a fairly significant amount of massing to them.
Some of them that are on the very steep roads where you got to go down those stairs
That's what
to get
this
to those
is,
things.
yeah, I mean,
So,
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I'm probably talking too much.
yeah, so I don't think that per se that building a larger home, because we understand that the intent is that this is a family home. We've approved some smaller homes, some cottages, some larger homes. There's a mix in Kenema, and I think that's appropriate. So you can have a larger home that will meet your needs. So I don't think our intent is to try to pull you away from that.
No.
However, yeah, I think there's some ways to break up the massing into that side garage. Those plans that were approved before and some of those other larger homes that are in that area there, the garage does have, it's a story and a half, so it has a kind of an ADU-like space above it. And because there's other examples of that there and stuff, I think that would perhaps be appropriate and would maybe give you a way to keep some accessory space, but break up the massing there and make that a little bit appropriate. So that's a way you could maybe gain a little bit.
So that,
Speaking to the height, so I would agree that the way this is drawn, and I understand that you have some challenging elevations, is that, and I don't want to cause you unnecessary rework, but if you feel like you need the height, perhaps you might go with more of the vernacular style than the bungalow style, because one of the defining elements of the bungalow is that it's
pitch.
a story and a half, or it's low. It emphasizes the horizontal over the vertical. So you might look at some of that too.
when we did the vernacular down the street, had
They have a steeper pitch.
smaller footprint, and we barely got that through with the smaller footprint. So the thought was with the bungalow is that we could get actually a little bit larger footprint.
Yeah,
to
but
work.
you've got a full 2 stories in a bungalow like look, because the massing's so big that second floor is probably a full flat ceiling height space because it's so big, instead of trying to hunker it all down below the main body of the house. But again, we're just talking. It's just helping. Maybe you think about it, but
I think we could get there. It's just got to push some stuff.
yeah, and the board's not a perpetual keep coming back till you get it right thing either. But I think whatever is being said is probably based on what maybe even what Grant said, there's a lot of guidelines that have to be met, and if you can meet those, it's a smooth sail. But then you've also got the neighborhood association to deal
Right.
with, which
My probably biggest question, and it's that elevation that's up there right now, is that because of the slope, and entrance and everything, no matter what we do,
there's ways to mitigate it, and
we can mitigate a little. That's what my question was.
With
gonna be.
landscaping.
Landscaping. Can we do some vegetation to minimize that? Can we actually artificially bring some grades up a little bit with some rockeries and that sort of thing to get some less
like a terrace sort of
facade,
thing, going down to 4th.
and just try to pull 4 or 5 feet of building facade out of it, and maybe we can drop the main ridge, drop that pitch enough and still get enough square footage up there.
What is that pitch? Do you know?
It's an 8 that on the side there.
And I don't know that would be with staff, but you could mitigate things by terraced rockery that starts at 4th and goes up so that you can still achieve what you want, but it feels like it's a little not so tall and
Right, yeah.
But that's a cost, right? But it's a way to reduce these big tall columns and funky stuff. And but I think if you were to ask anybody, they'd say you gotta figure out the garage gig, because
Okay.
that'll probably be a big deal. But and I agree with that. An ADU would be great. I can only deal with my in-laws for so long in the same house. Out back.
The other question, which it could be done other ways, I suppose, but having porch on that north side also helps diffuse the facade in a sense.
Yeah.
As opposed if there was no porch over there, then that's just all siding.
Right. Oh, you
So-
probably want that. It's just you have such great elements on the west elevation, but it's yeah. And even if you were to turn this thing with the front here with the garage on the side, you could still achieve something. You could change the roof pitch. You could do any number of things, like what Kelly was saying. You could make the front of the house on hedges.
So I think actually, in my experience, having the shed roof on a higher side of the building actually helps mitigate the feel of an ominous facade, because if you turn the gables towards 4th on the north side, that's just that much more siding that you're introducing into that height. So having it as a roof material then transition into siding material actually helps kind of break that up. So I think I like the idea of keeping the roof line, no matter what we do with what's underneath it, kind of keeping that, more shedded on the north and gabled on the west.
Yeah, you could still hunker the roof down more
Yeah,
to
yeah, I
reduce the
think that's-
massing.
I think we can drop that down. That's
If you could drop it down to even a 6 or 7, and I think that would help. I think, and I don't know what's allowed, but yeah, if there's a way to do landscaping to soften it.
On the north side there?
Yeah, but
Okay.
I still think,
And is it, I don't know how much you guys get into
it's not gonna work.
the front door placement in regards to what's considered front and, you know, from a zoning standpoint and stuff like that. I don't know if any of that matters so much for you guys as opposed to.
So I did read your question there, and as far as the code and that sort of thing, we don't perhaps so much care about. But I would say on that entry that it doesn't if you do face towards 4th Avenue, you wouldn't necessarily need to have a huge staircase all the way down to 4th Avenue. However, I would say that it should probably be functional in some way. So if it does come down off to the side to gain to the west side there of the house or something, that it shouldn't just be a decorative element only, or a porch that has no actual, it's not actually a front door from a design standpoint.
Okay.
What's the address? Is it on Hedges or 4th?
There is no address yet for this lot.
Because Hedges is technically a lot, though it looks like a flag lot. I mean, a street. It's like it's a street, but it doesn't go through.
Right.
But it has that illusion of a flag lot, essentially. Because you know what I'm saying? Like in a sort of a sense, it doesn't go through. These 349 and 407 come up and access that, right?
I think those are actually addressed on 4th.
So those are 4th.
No, they're 5th Avenue.
5th.
These are 5th,
those
but
are
they're not
5th.
accessed from 5th.
They have pedestrian access from.
Pedestrian. Yeah. But so this lot would it be 4th?
It would be 4th.
Fourth. I think so.
It would be 516 or 316.
I think if it faced Hedges, you know, when we assign addresses, we will work with the emergency providers, and so if they wanted it to be addressed in a certain way so that it was easier to find, then we would probably just do it that way.
Is 306 the one that was approved a year ago? Is that
Yes.
Does that have a detached garage?
They went
No,
through
that's
it
the one
a few
underneath.
iterations.
That was underneath.
Yeah,
That was the one underneath.
Yeah.
And
that
that's
was
the one we
only
did.
other time I think that that's ever been approved.
Yeah, that's the one we did. That's why I was trying to remember. It was on the corner because I remember the fire department had some issues.
And I will, skipping back a little bit, but on that 306, that's an example of where the address was to 4th, and the front door faces 4th, but it doesn't actually grade all the way down there because no one would walk up all those stairs. So
No.
the front door went off the side there, and there's a path kind of towards that other right of way that's parallel to Hedges.
There's also a rock wall down along 4th Avenue that I think is partially in front of 306 and a little bit in front of this lot. And so one of the conditions of approval for 306 was that nothing, no, we don't have a staircase that goes down and impacts that rock wall. So I think we'd be looking at the same thing. We would want to leave it as is and not modify that.
They were approved in 5 buildings.
This is yours.
6 and 7.
To answer a couple of your other questions that were on your list specifically, on the retaining wall question for the driveway.
Yeah.
I think retaining walls are totally appropriate, particularly in that area. There's all the homes and structures have that. I think the highest preference would be for like a stacked basalt wall, and then a lesser preference would be, I think concrete can be acceptable, but preferably like a faced concrete rather than a bare.
It was just a matter of horizontal room to work with in that particular context. So it'd be one spot where concrete would be very useful, just to keep the
Sure. And on that,
width down.
the very last question on the variance, so I think that was towards Hedges.
Yes, correct.
I think the setback is, would it be 20 feet there normal, or what's the?
I think it's 15. It'd be
It's considered a side yard.
So, as a general statement, because of grading issues, we've approved lots of small variances and preservation incentives for that specific reason, and that's common in Kenema. So as long as it doesn't impact any of the neighboring structures, and if it's just towards that 60-foot right-of-way, which is not really even being utilized to 60 feet, that's probably not going to be a problem if it fits more naturally with the site and has less impact on the context of the neighborhood there.
It would allow us to actually drop the floor elevations a little bit, which would help with mitigating that facade on the north elevation. That's the main goal of that, basically, is just to be able to get it off of that knoll that's sitting up there a little bit more so that we could, get the roof down.
I just had a thought, the back dormer, I've seen dormers on older homes where you'll have the two dormers, but the shed comes down with the dormer to the two gables, and the shed comes down with it. So it's kind of like this, but where these come down, the shed, you could googly it, or you could house it, but you could put in something like historic dormers on bungalows, and those two elements have been combined.
Well, that's what I've seen something like that. I think where I went more into the roof pitch on those gables was too steep.
It's more of in the shingle style, from the 1890s, turn of the century kind of a thing, when the shingle style was kind of getting on and the precursor to the craftsman style. But you could do something there that you could have those two gables with the shed coming down with the bank of windows right there. And can I go to elevation real quick? So where you've got those three windows right there, you could actually bring that shed forward so it meets those two gables and they create a valley there. But that could be a facade all the way across on the same plane, and then you could just have a bank of windows.
Yeah,
it would actually
blend in.
Yeah,
right?
If you had smaller windows going through there, that gives it more of a shed look with those gables. But you bring the gables pitched down just a little bit more, and it would actually look a little bit better instead of having that higher shed roof ridge coming down to the gable. And then, the porch open gable there, if you're going to have something there, it would have to probably be closed in, which it would even be more appropriate to keep a soffit to that back patio, and that gable not be open but closed.
Yeah, we're just trying to get a little more light in there.
Yeah, but if, there are some bungalows that have that open. It is kind of a up and down, but knee braces help tremendously, like you have on the side. But I think if you were to come back with something showing that elevation on the lower part raised up, so the columns aren't so tall and need to be simpler, and then with the roof pitch coming down, lower a titch, and then maybe even if you could shrink this thing 15%.
So the garage is good then, right?
No, I didn't say, nobody said that.
And also the windows,
Try to throw that in there, Rick.
the windows on the second level, I think should be like 1/1 like you have on the others.
Detached garage.
Yeah.
As
On
opposed
which side?
on the north
This level?
elevation,
On the north?
The retaining
Yeah.
wall on
just to
one
keep
side.
it more consistent,
Yeah, you
because
can
to
make
me
the
that
garage
kind of makes it
integrated. That's why I
really,
was thinking digging it into the side.
Yeah, exactly. And by
it sticks out more,
doing away
and
with that.
without it being the double hung windows. And,
Oh, I got kind of lazy there.
Because I need that entry.
Okay, maybe the entry, but look what it does to this elevation.
So sticking with the double hung.
double
look,
hung.
Absolutely.
and
If you can
the,
bring
I
this
was struck
this
with
roof
the,
come down to here.
I was struck with the massing also, and also the height of the columns,
Can you go to the floor plan?
to me, there has to be something done different with those.
I'm showing that to you because you know how to get.
But if you can
No, I don't.
bring up, the level like what he was talking with, it makes them not quite as, because they look like they're just going on and on. I mean,
Yeah, right.
Here,
So
the entry could be.
another question for you guys, would you almost prefer that the bottom side of that was actually more just screened, and instead of having the space under the deck going back to the building facade, we had it screened with siding and had plants up against it, would that almost be a preference?
Now that it would add more massing to it.
Okay.
You're trying to keep it simple with just posts
Okay.
going up
Yeah.
there. But plantings and rockery, but Ken's got an idea. This is just an idea, just a thought. This is something
We're
to think
open.
about. So Ken was saying where the living room is,
Uh-huh.
which no one's ever going to go in there anyway, but where the living room is, if you were to get rid of that and put it where the garage is and reconfigure the stairs, then you could slice that part off, and where the retaining wall is that you're looking for up on the uphill side could be the detached garage, that you can integrate that retaining wall as part of the garage structure, and then you could put space above that garage as an ADU.
And could we put a bridge across?
What's that?
Can we put a bridge across to tie it together?
In your mind.
Okay.
Yeah, you could think, yeah, it's a good, but it's a good idea that that living room, whether you use it or not, could be brought over here with a little grander staircase that could make a little bit more curve, and that could be your entry. But then that gives you more space here for a drive with the garage back here, because if you got to dig into that hillside for retaining, make the garage,
Part of that.
two birds with one stone.
And then you don't need the hammerhead to turn around when you
Right,
get out of the garage.
you don't need a hammerhead, you've got in and out, straight shot. But I know you don't want this detached garage, it's an extra cost because it's its own thing, but you've got to
I think
do
for
the
them,
retaining walls.
it's a lot about parking and being able to have somebody come to their house and have a place to park their car.
Well, you'll still have a place to park, it's just that you're going to shove this as back as far as you can, but you're going to have to dig into that hillside with
Right,
some sort of
right.
retaining, so make it part of the garage. And it could be a garage and a half, width, something that's in proportion, and still get you what you need. I get it that you want to be able to park in the garage and go straight in the house, but because you're dealing with a historic neighborhood, you don't always get everything you want. You got to play by the rules, so there's, and it's like Grant says,
You
it's
guys
not,
just really want to see that garage facade.
Yes, we want to see the garage.
but it's like what Grant says, if you follow those guidelines and you do those things, it's smooth sailing. If you want to try a different approach, it's going to take a little longer, and you may not be happy with the results.
Speaking of the detached garage, if we do allow preservation incentives, which we kind of talked about for the side setback.
You get closer.
So the setbacks for accessory structures, especially if you did put a second or another level on that garage for an EDU, you can do that, but your setback requirements are going to be larger. But you can get preservation
An
incentives
incentive to get it back further.
to put that garage closer to your rear property line, if that works better.
When you say rear property, you're talking east.
I'm talking about
the
this
south.
one right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So putting the garage as close as possible to this property line.
Right.
I think the only concern I would have is, I think we're up here. Their garage is also pretty close.
Exactly. So I mean, 6 foot's our absolute minimum, and then so I mean, maybe we go to 4.
But you could do basically a retaining foundation, cantilevered foundation that still doesn't compromise the neighbor, and you can still make it work. I don't know how far back you can go on that lot with digging and stuff, but you can still push that thing back further, and you get a big long driveway.
Right.
It's probably not everything you want to hear, but I think where that wall is, that black right there, you
Yeah.
can go further back, like where it says dead tree,
Right.
you can go further back.
Well, we're gonna probably end up shaving that whole knoll there. So yeah, theoretically, yes.
This
as far as-
garage kind of with the incentive be right here, so you get this big long, and if this was cut off, you could have a pretty wide driveway right
space.
through here that gives you plenty
A
of
lot of
parking,
parking.
even side by side.
Short of mirrored neighboring property.
And even if you cut that off and shrunk things just a titch and brought down, I think you'd be pretty far there.
Well, the other thing that we could do, I mean, if we create that void where the garage is now, it's going to create some reworking anyways, which that's fine.
But you're left-handed, right?
Well,
So you're creative, right? You can figure that out.
both. I'm kind of,
Yeah.
I'm all messed up.
I'm left-handed and I am messed up. So,
So what I'm getting at is I think it theoretically could be a benefit because like Ken had said that we'd be able to pull the whole building a little bit towards the south as well. So getting it off of minimizing the high point to low point differential there.
yep,
And then
yep,
you'd be able to bring it down some.
yeah. So it's a bunch of stuff you got to do,
Right.
but it's all fun.
Back to the drawing
Fun,
board.
yeah.
But I hope that helps. I don't know. Everybody wants to be constructive, and I can tell you, everybody here wants to make it happen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But there's just got to be some tweaks.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all here to make sure it does happen, not be a stumbling block. But
The attached garage.
know all of what we said. Yeah.
I think if you keep doing something persistently enough, it eventually just
And the
becomes
roof pitch.
Yeah.
norm, right? So, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. We
Thank you, guys.
appreciate
Yeah.
giving us the
Thanks.
opportunity to become part of this
Brainstorming.
wonderful community.
Yeah. Hopefully, we'll see you again soon.
Good dialogue. I really appreciate it. I think
Once the rain
it's
stops.
going in the right direction.
Hopefully.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3C on the agenda is a change to a grant request that we approved at 402 John Adams. And we'll start with a staff report on that.
Yeah, so this was back in October. We had a grant request for porch repair here. There were 2 bids submitted, and if you recall, one of them we realized, thanks to John, that was not licensed in Oregon, and so the applicant kind of went back and decided that she would like the option of either using the other contractor. She wasn't planning on using them, but then when the other contractor couldn't qualify, that she was kind of stuck with them. So she wants a little bit more flexibility and would like to get permission to do the work herself with family. So not hiring a general contractor. Then in that case, the grant would only be used to cover the cost of materials, and it would still be that 50-50 match. So if her materials cost ended up being, $1,500, the grant would be $750. And so I figured that was a simple enough request that she didn't need to be here to ask you. I think staff, I felt like it was reasonable, but I didn't want to make the decision on my own without consulting the board. So I just wanted to bring that to you for a decision.
Did I understand that we can't do anything without her present?
No, we can.
Oh, okay. Good. Well, I think it's a reasonable request. I wish I had a better idea what the dollar would shake out to be.
Well, it's going to be more than $1,000.
Yeah, she did. In one of her emails to me, she talked about materials being $1,300, and so I said, well, if that was the case, then your grant would be $650. And so I don't think that she knows exactly what the cost is.
So as part of the grants, do they have to have a license? I mean, there's nothing written into
So
any of
the way that the rules are essentially, if you're having work done by a contractor, they
It
have
has
to be licensed.
right?
The grant can be used to pay for materials if you're doing the work yourself as a homeowner. And then in that case, we just want the receipts from, Par Lumber or wherever you're getting your materials.
So I'll just say
Just
this.
feel that they can do it.
Well, I'll just say this. I think the person that was not licensed is a friend or a family friend. So I'm wondering if as I mentioned, that she may be circumventing this
Doing-
to get the
right.
money to still help him instead of the licensed guy, which, as I told Kelly, that the difference between the two bids is $340. So I don't think it's splitting hairs there. I think
Right.
it's, how do I still, I don't know. Because if it's just the materials, if the materials come in at $5 or $6 grand, then I'd really be wondering, you know, but if it's something like that, then if it's helping out to pay for material and you get the
And
receipts.
works get done.
Yeah.
And we always do get the receipts, and if the board wanted to, I guess limit I mean, we can even ask her to come back in March with, you know, with an estimate for materials, if the board would like to do that.
But I think if she's going to do it and pay for the materials at whatever lumber company, and she submits that receipt, and those materials are specific to this job, then I would think that would be fine.
Yeah, I would agree.
And it has to, and it's all inspected and everything, you know. at the building
Depends, if they're
department.
just replacing boards on the deck, they don't need a permit.
They don't need to,
But
okay.
if it becomes structural, which I
Structural.
know it will be, then
Yeah, from the looks of some of the,
yeah, it would
work that-
require a permit to redo it all. It really, I bet on that porch, it all needs to be tore out. It's in a bad way.
it's not just the floorboards, it's what's underneath.
But
No.
all they estimated
structural.
so far was just the surface.
Yeah,
Yeah, because they haven't gotten into,
but if that requires a permit, you know, if it's a unlicensed contractor, the unlicensed contractor would ask the homeowner to pay for the materials and get the permit. So,
so that he could do it without getting in.
right, and then she would call for the inspections. And I only say it's because I've seen it time and time again, and I'm very sensitive to that. So, I don't know. I want to help her out. So, I would err on the side of helping her out, I think.
I think I would too.
Yeah.
Do we need a motion or?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. I move that we approve PG 1706, 17-06, to allow her to do the work herself and just submit the receipts for the materials.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Will you poll the
Okay.
board members?
Board Member Blythe,
Aye.
Board Member McLaughlin,
Aye.
Board Member Met,
Aye.
Chair Basinger.
Aye. The motion carries and we'll move forward. Item 4, final item on the agenda, communication.
I do have a couple things.
Good.
So our next meeting in March is Spring Break Week. So it's March 27th. Is everyone available? Well, I just want to make sure that we'll have a quorum. Christina is planning on being here. She's available, and so if we'll have a quorum, then we can go ahead and move forward with that date.
I'm in.
I think I'll be here.
Okay.
I know for sure I'm leaving somewhere. I know I have to leave Thursday, but if I think I'll be around.
Okay.
Yeah, I expect to be here.
Okay.
That's at a minimum.
I think I'm going to be here.
Okay.
I may be up in Seattle,
Okay.
so
We.
Where will you be?
holding their little one.
Yeah.
Finding out life's not all about you anymore.
So we will have 2 hearings at, we may get some design advice, we may get some grants in, but we definitely have 2 applications. One is for 203 3rd Avenue. We did design advice for a garage with ADU on top, and then in addition to the existing home there, right on 3rd Avenue in Kenema, right by the entrance to the park. So that is coming in for March, and then the church, formerly known as Atkinson, next to the library, they have a very small application for a sign on the facade, a wall sign on the building.
On the daycare part?
No, on the
addition?
on the
old church?
on the original build,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So kind of above the entry, and so it.
It's on
Right
John
now, they're
Adams'
actually
side?
under code enforcement because they put banners up. Banners are not permitted on historic designated structures or within the historic district, I think, at all. And so, they've been asked to take the banner down. They want to make it into a proper sign. So they want to put on the building, and they're going to come and ask for approval for that. So you will actually see some hearings in March.
Kelly, is it on the 6th Street side or on the John?
I think they have
Adams?
one on each facade.
Ooh.
Okay, so I will go ahead and put the newspaper notices in for those hearings in March, expecting that we'll have a quorum. Christina will be here. We turned in our certified local government grant last week. That included the survey for the Promenade Park, so a boundary and a topo survey. It included programming, kind of like walking tours and workshops or lectures for Preservation Month in 2019. And then I have the funding for Claire. Claire wanted to go to the conference in April. And so we should hear back very soon regarding that.
So I should make my reservations?
I would go
or-
ahead and
Where was that
list
again?
it. Yeah, I think registration's probably open at this point, so
I think it was a.
Where is it again?
it's in Bend.
Oh, that's right.
So we asked for funding for one person to go in April this year, and then for next year, I asked for funding for 2 people. But it's flexible so that if there are, if we want to switch it and do 2 people this year, we can switch it. If we want to potentially do some other conference, someone wants to go to a different conference instead of the Oregon one next year, it's flexible, but essentially we have funding for people to go to conferences / trainings.
It's
Can I
April
go to the one
12th.
in Acapulco?
It's
Haven't heard of
it's
that one.
April 12th, 13th, and 14th.
Oh, I'm fin clipping with scouts at the beach.
So I went to one many years ago, and I thought it was, and some of the topics are really
Yeah.
of interest. So cool.
Yeah, so I'll let you know as soon as I hear back from them on that. They were gonna kind of put any of the applications that included that particular conference. They're gonna try and
Fast track them.
fast track us. Thank you. I'm having trouble
Okay.
thinking of words right now.
So I'll get on and
Yeah,
get in there.
and then that's all I've got. Other than Christina will be here for the next 4 or so meetings. And there probably won't be any special kind of work sessions. It will just be dealing with any applications that come in.
Cool.
Cool.
Okay. Well, we wish you well,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
That's exciting.
you and your passenger.
Yeah.
And with that, we will call this meeting adjourned.
Look at that, 8:15. Whew.